Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the tranquil world of samurai. No, not the sword fights or the battles you're probably imagining. Instead, picture yourself standing in the aftermath of a fierce battle, the smell of dust and blood still hanging in the air, while the warriors slowly make their way back to their camps. There's a quiet tension in the air as they remove their armor, but you know something else is about to happen. As the chaos settles, they prepare to unwind, and how do they do it? With a simple, yet sacred, tea ceremony. You probably won't survive this without a deep understanding of what makes samurai culture tick, but don't worry, you'll be okay. Just grab your cozy blanket, get comfortable, and let's dive into this ancient tradition. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world, I'm curious. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The samurai, warriors of honor and discipline, didn't just fight, they also had moments of deep introspection, something we can learn from. The end of a battle, filled with the echoes of death and destruction, would be the exact time a samurai would turn to something entirely peaceful, a tea ceremony. It's a fascinating contrast, right? After the chaos of war, these warriors would find comfort in the serenity of tea, sipping it as a means to clear their minds and find peace. You may not think of samurai as peaceful people, but tea was their antidote to the violence of their day. Historically, the samurai's connection to tea isn't as well known as their fighting skills, but it's just as significant. Tea ceremonies weren't a simple social gathering, they were an intricate, almost sacred process that helped warriors reset mentally. The tea they drank was not just any tea, it was symbolic, each cup a ritual that connected them to a deeper sense of mindfulness. The origins of this practice come from China, where tea was first introduced as part of Buddhist rituals. However, Japan's samurai took it a step further, elevating it into something uniquely their own. Historians still argue whether tea ceremonies were originally meant to be a form of meditation or simply a way to introduce camaraderie among warriors. Either way, they became an essential aspect of samurai culture, symbolizing discipline, respect, and a temporary respite from the brutality of their lives. You sit back, feeling the weight of the day drift away as the samurai of old unwind. As they step away from the battlefield, the tension in their bodies doesn't immediately fade. The mental toll of war lingers, and what better way to address that than with the ritual of tea? This simple act was more than just a physical indulgence, it was a way of grounding themselves in the present moment. Let's explore how this practice made its way into samurai life. The origins of tea itself are steeped in both myth and history. The earliest records of tea in China date back over 1,000 years before the samurai were even born. Tea was initially consumed for its medicinal properties, people believed it had healing powers. It wasn't until Buddhism spread to Japan that tea made its way to the land of the rising sun. Zen monks, known for their discipline, found tea drinking an excellent way to aid in meditation. This was the seed that would grow into the tea ceremonies we associate with samurai culture today. But how did tea become so central to the samurai's post-battle routine? For the samurai, tea wasn't just about drinking, it was about ritual. The samurai were men of structure, and every action they took had meaning. Tea ceremonies allowed them to unwind from the mental and emotional toll of the battle, but it also gave them a time to pause, reflect, and reaffirm their sense of purpose. It helped them transition from warrior to a more introspective, reflective being. Historians still debate whether the samurai initially adopted the practice because of the Zen influence or if it was more of a practical way to soothe the nervous system after a battle. Regardless, tea became an important ritual, forming an integral part of their daily lives. It was less about the tea itself and more about what it symbolized: control, mindfulness, and serenity. As you watch the samurai prepare for their tea ceremonies, you can't help but notice how methodical and intentional everything seems. Every movement, from the way the tea is poured to the way it is sipped, holds deep meaning. This wasn't a casual affair, it was a ritual designed not only to refresh the body but to calm the mind and restore balance after the chaos of combat. So, how did these warriors, known for their brutal skill in battle, find peace through something as simple as a tea ceremony? The samurai were heavily influenced by Zen Buddhism, a philosophy that encouraged mindfulness and living in the moment. Zen monks believed that every action, no matter how mundane, could be an opportunity for meditation. The tea ceremony was the perfect way to embody this philosophy. In the process of preparing and drinking tea, every gesture was performed with deliberate slowness and care. It was a way for the samurai to practice control over their environment, their emotions, and their minds, something they would also use in battle. The tea ceremony became the ultimate way to transition from the frenzy of the battlefield to the stillness of self-reflection. It was an act of cleansing, both physically and mentally. The samurai had just engaged in the violence of war, and now, with the ceremony, they could clear their minds of the anger, fear, and stress that had built up during combat. The tea itself, often served in a simple bowl, was a symbol of purity, cleansing away the chaos and bloodshed of the day. Historians still argue whether the tea ceremony had more of a spiritual or practical purpose. Some say it was purely a method of mental preparation, while others suggest it had a deeper spiritual significance, connecting the warrior to the universe and his inner peace. Regardless of the true origin, the fact remains that this practice became an essential part of the samurai's routine, providing them with the mental clarity they needed to face each new challenge. You begin to imagine yourself in the midst of a samurai tea ceremony, sitting quietly as the world around you seems to slow down. The room, dimly lit by the glow of paper lanterns, is almost silent, save for the soft sounds of tea being poured and the delicate movements of the tea master. There's no rush, no urgency. Everything is measured, deliberate. It's almost as if time has been suspended, allowing the samurai a moment to breathe, to exist without the weight of armor, swords, or war. The tea ceremony was much more than a simple act of drinking tea, it was a deeply structured, symbolic ritual. The samurai didn't just slurp their tea down, they engaged in every step with purpose. From the careful preparation of the utensils to the way the tea was served, every movement was a reflection of the samurai's personal discipline. The process became almost meditative, encouraging mindfulness and focusing the samurai's attention on the present. In the world of the tea ceremony, the utensils themselves took on great importance. There were the bamboo whisk and scoop, the tea bowl, the iron kettle, and the delicate cloths used to clean the utensils. Each of these objects had its own significance. The bamboo whisk, for example, wasn't just used to mix the powdered matcha, it was a tool that connected the samurai to nature, as bamboo was often revered in Japanese culture. The tea bowl, always chosen with care, was seen as a vessel not just for tea but for the spirit of the ceremony itself. There was a deep respect for these tools, and they were handled with reverence. Historians still debate whether the samurai's focus on these utensils reflected their desire for inner peace or their obsession with precision and control. Regardless of the reason, these tools became an integral part of the ritual, helping the samurai focus their minds and calm their souls. The tea ceremony wasn't just about the end result, it was about the journey, the slow, methodical process that allowed them to clear their minds after the chaos of battle. As you continue imagining the samurai at the tea ceremony, you notice how the environment itself seems to contribute to the peaceful atmosphere. The room is serene, with tatami mats on the floor and a simple, minimalist aesthetic. There's no excess, no distraction. Every element of the space has been carefully chosen to create a calming, uncluttered environment. This wasn't just about the tea, it was about cultivating an atmosphere of quiet reflection. The tools used in the ceremony were just as important as the tea itself. These weren't everyday objects, they were carefully selected and often passed down through generations. The iron kettle, for instance, was more than just a functional item, it was a work of art, crafted by a master metalworker. The tea bowls, too, were often handmade and chosen for their beauty and the way they felt in the samurai's hands. Each item in the ceremony carried a history and a story. These tools were sacred, and the samurai respected them deeply. The act of preparing the tea was as much about honoring the tools as it was about drinking the tea itself. The tea ceremony also wasn't just an individual activity, it was a communal experience. Samurai would often gather in small groups to partake in the ceremony, and while it was a time of personal reflection, it was also a time of connection with others. The shared ritual created a sense of unity, even among warriors who had just faced off on the battlefield. It was a rare moment where warriors could lower their guards, exchange ideas, and find common ground, something that was essential in a culture built around loyalty, honor, and social hierarchy. Historians still debate the social aspect of the tea ceremony. Was it a form of diplomacy, a way to make alliances, or simply a social gathering after battle? Some suggest that the tea ceremony served as a subtle platform for political maneuvering, where samurai could solidify relationships or settle differences. Others believe it was purely a personal moment of quiet reflection. Either way, it's clear that the ceremony wasn't just about tea, it was about creating a space for connection, healing, and reflection. You feel the calm of the tea ceremony seep into your bones as the samurai gather, silently sipping their tea. The soft clink of ceramic on the tatami mat is the only sound. The world outside, with its battles and chaos, seems distant now. But this moment of calm, though brief, is a powerful ritual for the samurai. It gives them space to breathe, to reset. The physical act of drinking tea is almost secondary. The true power lies in the reflection that comes with it. The tea ceremony wasn't just a mental reset, it was also deeply psychological. After the stress and violence of battle, the samurai had to deal with the emotional toll. Battles weren't just physically taxing, they left a lasting psychological impact. The tea ceremony offered them an opportunity to process these emotions and find a sense of inner peace. It was a brief escape from the brutality they faced every day. The ritual provided a moment of stillness where warriors could simply be, away from their roles as fighters and strategists. The act of sipping tea in silence allowed for personal reflection. It wasn't uncommon for a samurai to close their eyes during the ceremony, lost in thought. They reflected on the lives lost in battle, their own survival, and the meaning of it all. This moment of introspection was crucial. It wasn't just about finding peace in the present, it was about reconciling with the past and preparing for the future. Historians still argue whether the psychological benefits of the tea ceremony were truly understood at the time or if it was simply a tradition that had evolved over the centuries. Some scholars suggest that the samurai recognized the importance of mental clarity, while others believe the ceremony's focus on mindfulness was an unintended side effect. Regardless, it's clear that the tea ceremony served as a valuable tool in helping the samurai maintain mental equilibrium after the turbulence of war. The samurai's ability to maintain focus and clarity in the midst of chaos was legendary, but what allowed them to cultivate this focus after battle? The tea ceremony, with its meditative nature, acted as a mental reset, a way to recharge their minds and prepare for whatever was to come. It wasn't just about calmness, it was about sharpening their mental faculties, much like a warrior preparing for the next fight. But in this case, the fight wasn't on a battlefield, it was with their own inner turmoil. For the samurai, the ceremony was a form of self-care in a world that had no room for weakness. This ritual was deeply rooted in the practice of mindfulness, which we know today as being key to reducing stress, enhancing concentration, and improving mental well-being. By paying attention to the smallest details, like the way the tea was poured, the way it was served, and the movements of the tea master, the samurai practiced mindfulness in a way that grounded them, making them present in the moment rather than consumed by past battles or future fears. The tea ceremony, with its specific steps and deliberate actions, was a way to practice focus. It wasn't just about drinking tea, it was about clearing the mind, focusing on the present, and finding stillness in a world that constantly demanded movement. This practice of mental recharging helped the samurai face their challenges with greater clarity. Every cup of tea was a chance to reset their mental state, preparing them for whatever lay ahead. Historians still debate whether this practice of mindfulness was instinctual for the samurai or if it was something that developed over time as the tea ceremony became more ingrained in their culture. Some argue that the samurai were inherently attuned to their mental states, while others believe the ceremony became a vital tool for combating the psychological toll of constant conflict. Either way, it's undeniable that the tea ceremony played a crucial role in the samurai's ability to remain sharp, focused, and centered. You picture the samurai now, completely still, their minds drifting away from the noise of war and into the quiet of the tea room. In this space, they can release the tension accumulated from their daily lives as warriors. Tea ceremonies were not only about self-restoration but were also steeped in the philosophy of Bushido, the samurai code of honor. Within this framework, tea was much more than a beverage, it was a symbol of humility, discipline, and respect. The Bushido code emphasized virtues like loyalty, courage, and honor. However, one of its core tenets was the concept of self-discipline. The tea ceremony aligned perfectly with this value, as it required the samurai to act with precision, grace, and respect. Each movement, each gesture was an act of discipline. The samurai, who were often seen as the epitome of strength and stoicism, had to show humility during the ceremony. It was a humbling experience, reminding them that true strength wasn't just about physical prowess, it was about mastery over the mind and emotions. In the tea ceremony, this mastery was reflected in the careful way the tea was prepared and served. A simple act, like whisking powdered tea in a bowl, required a focused mind and steady hands. The act of pouring the tea was done in complete silence, allowing the samurai to focus entirely on the present moment. This discipline translated into their everyday lives as warriors. It wasn't enough to simply fight well, they also needed to maintain control over their thoughts and actions. Historians still argue whether the tea ceremony was an intentional tool for reinforcing Bushido or if it evolved alongside the samurai's cultural values. Some believe that tea ceremonies were strictly a method of maintaining discipline, while others suggest that it was a manifestation of the broader philosophy of harmony and balance central to Bushido. Regardless of how it began, it became a practice that embodied everything the samurai valued: strength, humility, and control. The tea ceremony wasn't just a personal ritual for the samurai, it was also an intricate social event, often involving a tea master who was both revered and highly skilled. Picture this: a room full of warriors, all gathering together after the chaos of battle, while one figure, the tea master, quietly orchestrates the entire ceremony. This master wasn't just a servant pouring tea, they were a guide, a figure of authority in a space where silence reigned, and each movement was laden with meaning. The role of the tea master was critical. They weren't merely responsible for preparing the tea, but for shaping the entire atmosphere of the ceremony. The tea master's movements were graceful, deliberate, and precise, every gesture embodying the core principles of the samurai: discipline, respect, and humility. This individual was often seen as an expert in the art of tea, possessing not only knowledge of the ceremony itself but also a deep understanding of the philosophical and spiritual underpinnings that made it meaningful. To be a tea master was to be a leader in a very quiet, understated way. In the world of the samurai, the role of the tea master also carried with it significant social power. A skilled tea master could elevate the experience of the ceremony, turning it into a space for reflection, dialogue, and even diplomacy. Samurai would often use tea ceremonies to build alliances, settle differences, or even negotiate. The tea ceremony created an environment of mutual respect where individuals could express their thoughts in ways that might not have been possible in more direct or confrontational settings. Historians still debate whether the social power of the tea master was as important as the ceremony itself. Some argue that the social aspect was secondary, while others claim that the tea master played a central role in the samurai's strategy of diplomacy and alliance building. Either way, there's no denying that the tea master was an essential figure, one who brought more than just tea to the table. They brought meaning, structure, and connection to a tradition that helped the samurai maintain both their mental and social equilibrium. The tea ceremony wasn't just an individual moment of reflection, it became a subtle arena for political maneuvering and social power. In the world of the samurai, where loyalty and hierarchy were of the utmost importance, a tea ceremony could be the perfect backdrop for forging alliances, making subtle political statements, or settling old grudges. The ceremony's quiet, contemplative atmosphere allowed warriors to lower their guards, providing a space where relationships could be built and sometimes tested, without the tension of the battlefield looming over them. For a samurai, the act of hosting a tea ceremony was often a calculated move. Inviting others to participate in such a personal ritual was a way of demonstrating one's status and influence. It wasn't just about the tea itself, it was about the opportunity to subtly assert power. Samurai could use the ceremony to evaluate their peers, determine allegiances, and subtly convey messages. In this environment of shared quiet, what wasn't said was often just as important as what was. The act of pouring the tea, serving the guests, and even the selection of the tea utensils were all part of a larger social dynamic. A samurai might choose a particular tea bowl based on its significance, subtly reinforcing a point or a message. A well-chosen utensil could express refinement and taste, enhancing the host's prestige. And in some cases, the tea ceremony could serve as an arena for rivals to gather and come to terms, smoothing over tensions that might otherwise erupt on the battlefield. Historians still debate whether these social dynamics were an inherent part of the tea ceremony or whether they developed as the ritual became more ingrained in samurai culture. Some argue that the ceremony's political implications were a natural extension of the samurai's hierarchical world, while others believe it evolved as a response to the need for a more peaceful, diplomatic way to resolve conflicts. Either way, the tea ceremony became more than just a ritual of peace, it became a tool of power. Now, picture yourself at the center of this quiet but intense ritual. The samurai, whose life has been a series of battles and bloodshed, sit in a circle, sipping tea. But as you look closer, you realize there's something more to this tea than just its soothing warmth. The ceremony has its own unspoken language, a subtle exchange of messages through every gesture, every choice. A well-placed glance, a carefully selected tea bowl, or the precise timing of when the tea is served, all of these convey meaning in ways words cannot. In the world of the samurai, where honor and reputation meant everything, tea ceremonies became a form of communication. Samurai were trained to pick up on these small cues, to interpret the unspoken messages embedded in the ritual. A host might choose a specific bowl, one that symbolized respect or humility, to send a message to their guests. The way the tea was poured could be a statement of the host's personal control, or a gesture of peace toward a rival. Even the positioning of the tea utensils could reflect the dynamics of the relationships within the group. Historians still argue about how intentional this secret language of the tea ceremony was. Some scholars believe it was a deliberate strategy by samurai to communicate covertly in a setting where direct confrontation or confrontation through words was frowned upon. Others argue that it evolved more naturally as part of the culture of indirect communication that was prevalent among the samurai. Regardless of the origins, the tea ceremony became a space where subtlety ruled, where much could be said without ever uttering a word. This practice of silent communication also reflected the samurai's broader approach to conflict. They were masters of both battle and diplomacy, and tea ceremonies allowed them to navigate the latter with the same skill they applied on the battlefield. It was a way to assert control without engaging in the overt aggression that marked their daily lives. And for a warrior who had spent most of his life in combat, this was an invaluable skill, an ability to negotiate, settle scores, and maintain peace with nothing more than a well-chosen gesture. As the days passed, the tea ceremony continued to serve as an essential tool for the samurai, especially during times of war. In moments of peace, it was a chance to reflect, communicate, and recharge mentally. But during active conflict, the ceremony took on new significance. It wasn't just a moment of personal respite, it became a vital part of maintaining calm in the midst of chaos, helping the samurai stay grounded amidst the violence that permeated their world. During times of war, tea ceremonies were often held in temporary encampments, far from the calm of traditional tea rooms. These ceremonies offered a small island of tranquility in the midst of a storm. Even on the battlefield, where soldiers were hardened and battle-hardened, the act of pausing to engage in the quiet ritual of tea served as a moment of reprieve. Samurai knew that in order to maintain their effectiveness, they had to be mentally prepared. Tea, then, was not just a soothing ritual but a form of mental conditioning. Tea ceremonies were also a way of reinforcing unity among warriors during wartime. After a long, hard-fought battle, the warriors could come together around a kettle of tea, sharing the quiet bond that the ritual created. It wasn't just about resetting individuals, it was about restoring a sense of collective peace. In these moments, the samurai could set aside their weapons and their differences, finding a sense of solidarity through the shared act of drinking tea. It was a ritual that transcended individual struggles and connected the warriors on a deeper, more spiritual level. Historians still debate whether these wartime ceremonies were as widespread as we think. Some suggest that tea ceremonies were rare during active conflict, as samurai were often too busy to participate in such rituals. Others argue that, even during times of war, tea was considered an essential practice for maintaining mental clarity and discipline. Regardless of the frequency, it's clear that the tea ceremony served as a stabilizing force, both for individuals and groups, offering a much-needed break from the chaos of battle. As the era of the samurai slowly faded into history, so too did the prominence of the tea ceremonies. The end of feudal Japan and the rise of a more centralized government meant that the samurai class was gradually disbanded, and with it, many of the traditions that had defined their lives, including the tea ceremony. But even as the samurai's political power waned, the cultural significance of tea remained. In the years following the fall of the samurai, the tea ceremony evolved. While its purpose remained rooted in mindfulness and reflection, it no longer served as a direct method of mental preparation for battle. Instead, it became an expression of a more peaceful, aestheticized tradition. The ceremonial aspects were further refined, and the practice spread beyond the samurai to broader Japanese society, where it became an integral part of social gatherings and cultural life. However, the essence of the samurai's tea practice remained in the core values of discipline, respect, and quiet contemplation. The warrior who once used tea as a way to restore his focus and strength after battle now shared it with others in a more peaceful context. The ritual continued to serve as a reminder of the discipline and serenity that samurai warriors strive to maintain, only now, the focus was on creating a serene experience for those around them, rather than preparing for the next conflict. Historians still debate the role the tea ceremony played in the final years of the samurai's rule. Some suggest that it became a nostalgic ritual for the samurai, a way to cling to the traditions of the past. Others argue that it was a necessary tool for transition, helping former warriors navigate the changing political landscape. Regardless of its specific role, the ceremony's evolution from a warrior's ritual to a cultural symbol underscores its lasting significance in Japanese culture. As the centuries passed, the tea ceremony continued to evolve and adapt, even beyond the samurai era. Today, the essence of the samurai's ritual lives on, not just in Japan, but around the world. While the warriors themselves may have faded into the pages of history, the calm and disciplined practice of tea remains as a living legacy of their way of life. What began as a method of mental preparation and peace for samurai warriors has now become a celebrated and refined tradition, cherished for its beauty and tranquility. Modern tea ceremonies often focus on the aesthetic aspects, with meticulous attention given to the tea utensils, the environment, and the delicate movements of the tea master. But while the modern practice may seem more ceremonial than practical, its roots in mindfulness, discipline, and respect are still very much intact. When people today sit down for a cup of tea, they often perform their own silent rituals of reflection, finding a brief moment of peace in the middle of their busy lives. The samurai's legacy is also felt in the broader cultural embrace of mindfulness practices. Today, people from all walks of life turn to tea as a way to calm their minds and center themselves, much like the samurai once did after battle. The tea ceremony, in its original and modern forms, teaches us the power of slowing down, of taking a moment to breathe and reflect, even in the busiest or most turbulent times. Historians still debate how much of the original spirit of the samurai's tea ceremony remains in modern practice. Some argue that, over time, the ceremony's deeper meanings have been lost or watered down, while others believe that the ritual's core essence has only grown stronger as it has been refined and adapted over the years. No matter where the tradition stands today, it is clear that the tea ceremony remains an enduring symbol of peace, focus, and the quiet strength that once defined the samurai. As you settle into the quiet of your own space, sipping your tea, you might reflect on the samurai's journey, from the violent chaos of battle to the peaceful, introspective moments spent in the tea room. In a way, their practice has transcended time, offering us a reminder of the power of mindfulness and self-discipline. The samurai may have put down their swords, but the essence of their practice continues in the tea we drink, the moments of calm we seek, and the quiet rituals we use to navigate the turbulence of our own lives. The samurai's ability to transition from the violence of the battlefield to the peacefulness of the tea ceremony is nothing short of remarkable. But perhaps that's the true lesson they left behind, the ability to find peace in the most chaotic of circumstances. Whether they were in the midst of battle or seated quietly with a bowl of tea, the samurai were able to center themselves, to reset, and to move forward with clarity. It's a practice that we, too, can learn from today. In our busy, fast-paced world, taking the time to step back, to breathe, and to reflect, even for just a few minutes, is a form of strength, not weakness. The next time you sip your tea, think about the samurai who, after a long day of fighting, used that very act to ground themselves. Remember how something as simple as drinking tea could restore their focus, their spirit, and their sense of inner peace. The tea ceremony, once a practice for warriors, now offers us all a chance to pause, to reflect, and to reconnect with ourselves in a world that often feels too fast, too loud, and too overwhelming. As the last sip leaves your cup and the warmth of the tea lingers, you can let go of the day's stresses, just as the samurai once did. Allow the peace that comes from this ritual to settle over you. And as the night deepens, know that you carry with you a quiet strength, much like the samurai did in their moments of stillness. Let the sounds of the night drift away as you too find your peace, your moment of calm in the chaos of the world around you.